The Occultist build. Let's do a guide for Occultist. What is the Occultist? According by the devs, he's back rank, but truth to be told, you can play him on all positions 1 to 4. According to devs, he's range damage, but he's also very good at doing melee damage. Occultist is basically everything. A healer, range damage, melee damage, support, and most of all, debuffer. He debuffs enemies. He's valid in nearly all team compositions, but that would highly depend out of his subclass and what you actually need. He comes in 3 different forms: Aspirant, Warlock, and Ritualist. Now first, we need to talk about how to play Occultist and what's the most important thing for him. You see the yellow fist under Sacrificial stab where it says self, yellow fist when target is under combo. Basically, you need to accumulate those fists, 2 of them, so you can cast higher level spells, or better to say, you need equal or above 2 of those fists to cast some of his spells. And that's the entire point with him. He gets OP after round 3 or 4, but extremely weak during round 1 and 2. Not to mention that you need someone to cast combo on enemies for most of the skills to work. It's a tricky class, it ain't a class for the beginners, but he can hurt a lot once you master him. The first skill, Sacrificial Stab, basic attack, it accumulates those yellow fists so you can hurt even more. Basically, this skill can crit for a lot, okay, and it's only valid on Aspirant build, no one else. Abyssal Artillery, range damage, covers 2 less spots, but number 3 and 4, extremely good skill, especially on a Warlock and Ritualist. If it says Warlock or Ritualist here instead of Aspirant, that's when you want to use Abyssal Artillery. A good thing about Abyssal Artillery, if you accumulate 2 of those yellow fists under combo, you can stun 2 enemies at once. Weakening Curse. In my point of view, this is the weakest spell. What it does, it puts a combo, but then he misses an entire turn when he puts a combo on enemies, plus he needs to use that combo for him to get OP with those higher level spells. So someone else should put a combo, not an Occultist. This Weakening Curse is valid on Warlock and especially on a Ritualist. Next skill would be Wyrd Reconstruction, classic heal. You can crit when you have 2 yellow fists, or as they call these yellow fists, unchecked power. Okay. This spell was way much better in Darkest Dungeon 1 than in Darkest Dungeon 2. In Darkest Dungeon 2, if it says Warlock or Ritualist, especially Ritualist instead of Aspirant here, then you can consider using Wyrd Reconstruction, but find someone else to heal, unless this is a Ritualist. Next skill would be Demon's Pool. Extremely good spell, like to the extreme. Why? It pulls squishes toward you, so Leper or some other melee can squash them. It also removes corpses. And if you have that unchecked power, Yellow Fists, it can stun under combo. Out of all subclasses, Warlock profits the most out of Demon's Pool. It can be played on Warlock and Ritualist, not on Aspirant. Vulnerability Hex. Now, this one is solid because it removes dodge from enemies. It can be played from all 4 positions and it targets all 4 positions. The best subclass to go with Vulnerability Hex would be Ritualist. It can also be played on a Warlock. Binding Shadows. Melee that moves him forward. That's only valid if your team is under movement, like Jester or Man-at-Arms or Grave Robber and so on. A specific build, extremely valid on Aspirant and no one else. Malediction. Extremely good spell if you can trigger it. Why do I say so? Very simple, it requires 2 yellow fists, or better to say 2 unchecked power. The spell works best if it says Warlock here instead of Aspirant. Anamnesis, only valid on Aspirant subclass of the Occultist. As you can see, Anamnesis deals 150% more damage, plus it bleeds enemies combined, for example with a Firestarter from the Runaway. This spell can bleed, AoE bleed, all 4 positions at once and put them on fire at the same time. That's a lot of damage for Anamnesis. Basic damage goes up to 4 to 6. If he crits, 6 to 10. Plus bleed, plus fire from the fire starter. That's easily entire enemy team AoE for a 15 damage per round when he crits. That's huge. Again, only valid on Aspirant. The Burning Stars. If it says Warlock instead of Aspirant, that's when you wanna use the Burning Stars. Consider them as ultimate spells. Okay, Burning Stars, Anamnesis, and Malediction. High level spells from a Warlock. Only this one is single target and it deals the most damage, especially when it crits. Again, Warlock, crazy good to have this one. Or it can also be played on a Ritualist, avoid on Aspirant. At the end we got Chaotic Offering. It's valid on Warlock, Ritualist and Aspirant. What it does, it removes some percentage of your HP so you can get combo, or better to say unchecked power, to prepare those higher level spells on the next round. Very tricky to play with. I would not recommend this one to beginners. Valid on Warlock, Ritualist and Aspirant. How do we play Aspirant? Melee Occultist. This is Occultist that shouldn't use curses. He should use damage and damage only. Can be played on position 1, 2 and 3. Best to play him on position 2 and 3. If enemies are squishy and they got combo skulls on, you're gonna use Sacrificial Stab immediately to open up fights. If someone is in need of healing, you're gonna heal at the start. If you think that a fight will last for 4 rounds and more, then you want to open up with Chaotic Offering, so you can prepare slowly for Anamnesis. If enemies shuffle you, okay, then you can always go with Binding Shadows to move forward. Basically what you aim for with Aspirant are crits, 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 defense, and AoE damage at the end. Very simple subclass to play. Now, if it says Warlock instead of Aspirant, then we're gonna use him on position number 3 or position number 4. You usually gonna open up fights with Abyssal Artillery. If enemies are way too tough, you're gonna use Chaotic Offering and slowly prepare for the Burning Stars, especially for the bosses. Warlock is also very useful because of the Demon's Pull, where you're gonna be able to pull the squishes towards your teammates and clear corpses. Extremely useful skill on a Warlock. If someone is in need of a healing, you can always heal, but if you have a healer, or if you have items to heal, I would recommend removing Wyrd Reconstruction and playing with Malediction. So this should be the optimal build when you know what you're doing when you want to play Warlock Occultist. It says Ritualist instead of Aspirant. This is the build that we want to play. This is a cursing Warlock. He curses enemies, okay, he's very vulnerable, but he heals more than other Warlocks. And he usually gets a self buff once he casts a curse. Curses would be Weakening Curse and Vulnerability Hex. Self buffs would be damage, crit, and dodge. You can play him on position number 2 or on position number 3. Best played on position number 3. A Ritualist should usually open up with pull some squishy. If not, then with some of these curses. And once he doesn't have anything smarter to do, he can use Sacrificial Stab. Basically, the Ritualist is a full support Warlock. You need a good team around him. Okay, you need to put combo on enemies, pull them, drag them, and heal your allies. In my point of view, there are better support classes, and Occultist is probably the weakest support class. He's definitely best as Aspirant and Warlock. Aspirant for melee, Warlock for ranged, Ritualist that I'm currently showing up here as a support. So basically Occultist is everything, depends on the subclass. Hero Shrines important for the Warlock. You need to unlock the skills, okay? They are extremely important compared to some other classes. You should unlock them as soon as possible because of these 3 subclasses for a Warlock. All of them are played differently, as you've seen. So yes, go for Hero Shrines and unlock all of his abilities immediately. So how do we play Warlock? In case of Aspirant here, what you want to do is open up with Chaotic Offering and slowly build up towards Anamnesis. If enemies are weaker like this, you can always opt in for Sacrificial Stab. If someone else is here instead of a Leopard that can switch positions, for example Highwayman or Men-at-Arms, Okay, they can move spot 1 and 2, then you're gonna open up with Binding Shadows. And if this was, like, for example, Highwayman, you open up with him with a repass, these two switch positions, Warlock goes 2, 1, 2, Highwayman will go 1, 2, 1, okay? And then you have everything activated. That's how you play. Depends, again, on a team composition. In this case, we're gonna use Sacrificial Step. But the most important also, that's for Aspirant, if you are Warlock Occultist, okay, instead of Aspirant, then you're gonna open up usually with Abyssal Artillery and slowly prepare for the Burning Stars. If you play as a Cursing Warlock, Curse enemies, goddammit, one of these two, Weakening Curse or Vulnerability Hex. So what are the good trinkets on the Occultist? Shambler's Eye is the first one. This one is only valid on Aspirant. Clenching Claws are also good on Aspirant Occultist. Warlock, Ritualist, and Aspirant Occultist all profit out of Clarifying Carcanet, but this one is tricky to get, or better to say, it's tricky to go with Relics and Bubbles above 75%. Kitchen Knives, valid on Aspirant, especially if you have Plague Doctor to put Blight on enemies, and then you get extra chance to crit with Occultist, and he already has a high chance to crit with his basic attack, and he's gonna crit non-stop with Kitchen Knives, but only if Plague Doctor is in your team. Nautical Compass, absolutely crazy on all types for Occultist, Warlock, Ritualist, Aspirant. Scalded Skull, his next unique trinket. I would say that this item needs a rework. It's very bad, okay, because you don't plan to play with missing heroes, you plan to keep them alive, alright? So forget that it exists until it receives a rework. Curing Koopa can be very good on Occultist. Carve Botkin, if you plan to use Wyrd Reconstruction, it can heal you and then bleed you out, and this is a chance to get extra action 20%. Not bad on Occultist. Now, if you plan to put speed on your Occultist, especially on Aspirant, this is the one you're searching for. Crit, 50% chance to happen on a turn start. Extremely good. Celebrated Chalice, absolutely crazy on Aspirant and on Warlock. Smoldering Hymnal, very good on Warlock and Aspirant. Again, Enlightening Element, extremely good on both Warlock and Aspirant. Fisherman's Line, if you have Fisherman's Net or a Scrap Grenade, it can be quite OP on both Warlock and Aspirant. The reason is very simple, AoE Stun, AoE Bleed. The last Occultist unique item would be Seeing Sphere. This one is mostly valid on a Ritualist, and it can be put on a Warlock, but Ritualist profits the most out of it if you plan to play a Demon's Pool Ritualist. Why on Ritualist? Ritualist starts as vulnerable, and this converts vulnerable to Yellow Fists. 20% healing given, greater Protectorate, good on a healing Warlock or Wyrd Reconstruction. Greater Gilded Mind, absolutely great on all characters, including all subclasses for Occultist. Same can be said about Greater Sacrificial Host and Greater Anchoring Charm, and same can be said about Greater Heal Draught and Greater Cleansing Censer. The subclass that profits the most out of Greater Hail Draught would be Aspirant. Healing Received, also good on Aspirant. Greater Sharpness Charm, great on both Warlock and Aspirant. Greater Heartseeker, absolutely great on both Warlock and Aspirant Occultist. Greater Wolf's Blood is absolutely great on every class, including all subclasses for the Occultist. Greater Hit Shield, you can consider taking this on all types of Occultist. Greater Clothing Cruor, it's very good on the Ritualist. You can also consider taking Greater Clothing Cruor if there is nothing else for the Occultist. Now, what about low tier trinkets on the Occultist? It depends on a subclass. If it's Aspirant, you want to raise damage and crit chance, and you want speed. Always good to have is something against stress, so he doesn't get stressed as often. You can always sacrifice health or healing received to get that extra crit. Now, same can be said about Warlock, same can be said about Ritualist, okay? Do not sacrifice damage for healing. If you play Ritualist instead of Aspirant, that's when you can maybe sacrifice crit for bigger health pool. In case of Warlock and Aspirant, always sacrifice health for damage. That's about it. Respite and in buffs. What we need on the Occultist. On all subclasses of Occultist, okay, basic thing is giving him some food, raise overall HP, and then you can opt in and consider to take in items that gonna provide damage, dodge, armor, maybe even stealth, but most of the times you just wanna put into relations during Respite. Warlock Mastery Trainer. If you play as Aspirant, you want to level up Sacrificial Stab and you want to level up Anamnesis as soon as possible. Very good thing to level up during map number 2 and 3 would be Chaotic Offering. If you play as a Ritualist, you want to level up Demon's Pool and Weakening Curse or Vulnerability Hex as soon as possible. If it says Warlock instead of Aspirant or a Ritualist, that's the ranged Warlock, and the first skill that you want to upgrade would be Abyssal Artillery. After that you can opt in for Demon's Pool, and on the last map you want to upgrade the Burning Stars. That would be it for the Occultist. As I said, tricky class to play, can be played on all positions, melee build, range build, support build, healer build. It all depends what you need in a team, but basically he goes well with all other characters, alright? And it's a fun class to play, tricky, a bit hard. I would recommend starting playing the Occultist after like 30 or so hours in the game, once you master the game a bit. Don't go for it early on, because you're gonna get mad. It's a bit complicated to play.